Hi, so this is something new that I'm trying out pretty much every day. I think of some stuff and then I want to make sure if what I'm thinking is actually accurate. And then I go on Wikipedia and sometimes I spend quite a while just on Wikipedia browsing around and seeing what I can find. And I thought that since sometimes I find some pretty cool stuff, it's interesting to go down these Wikipedia rabbit holes. So I thought, why not make this a series? And this series I would call Wikipedia Trips. So welcome to the first Wikipedia trip. So today I was watching a documentary by David Attenborough about first life, and I heard this idea of snowball Earth, and I got to thinking, wow, interesting. So there was an ice age some long time ago, and so I was interested to read more about exactly like was there actually ice ages, how often they happen, and all of that. And I'm sure we will reach some interesting points here. So snowball Earth hypothesis. So it's not certain that once upon a time Earth's surface became entirely or nearly entirely frozen, sometime 650 million years ago, during the Cryogenium period. Okay, that sounds good. Feasibility of an ice or slush-covered ocean. A number of unanswered questions remained, including whether the Earth was a full snowball or a slush ball with a thin equatorial band of open or seasonally open water. Snowball Earth episodes proposed multicellular forms. Oh, so this is interesting. This is what I want to go into. So multicellular life forms. So the Cambrian Explosion. This is something I have heard a lot about. And the Cambrian Explosion was basically the moment or the time in history, this period, where single-celled organisms became multi-celled organisms, and the life sort of exploded into all these different vast variety that we see around us today. A great oxygenation event. That sounds interesting as well. What do we have here? Some kind of Genghis Khan names. What do we have here? Oh, so this is exactly what I wanted to see. Life timeline. Great that they have it here. So this is 4.5 billion years ago. So 4.5 billion years ago, approximately, when planet Earth was created. And then for about 500 million years, we had water, and earliest life, about 4 billion years ago. So for a long time in the history of Earth, most of Earth's history, we had just single-celled life. Unicellular organism, also known as a single-celled organism, is an organism that consists of a single cell, unlike multicellular organisms that consist of multiple cells. That's pretty... makes sense. Okay, earliest oxygen 3.5 billion years ago. What did it say here? Before photosynthesis. Wow, the Earth's atmosphere had no free oxygen. Photosynthesis. Okay, photosynthesis. So quite long time of photosynthesis, like about 1 billion years or even more of photosynthesis. And you see at some point we had atmospheric oxygen, and right after that we had an oxygen crisis, which doesn't sound great. Then, we move on 4.5 billion years. Well, we could see first earliest life 4 billion years ago, and it was 1 billion years, 2 billion years, and after 2 billion years, so that's 2,000 million years of just single cells going about their business, we get to eukaryotes. And these are organisms whose cells have a nucleus enclosed within a nuclear envelope. So basically like proper, decent, actual cells. But still not multicellular life. So multicellular life, organisms that consists of more than one cell in contrast to unicellular organisms. So that makes sense, right? So amazing that it took about 2.5 billion years to finally get to multicellular life. And then we see all these other things arriving, mollusks and arthropods and plants. We have nothing about plants. Dinosaurs, mammals, birds, flowers, and primates. So this is really cool. Okay, so Cambrian Explosion. What do we have here? Cambrian Explosion, or the Cambrian Explosion radiation, was an event approximately 541 million years ago in the Cambrian period, when practically all major animal classes or whatever started appearing in the fossil record. It lasted about 13 to 25 million years and resulted in the divergence of most modern Okay, yeah, so basically exactly what I mentioned briefly before. So this was the point. In the span of 13 to 25 million years, all the single cells diverged into incredible complexity, into some kind of stuff that we see around us now. So plants and fungi and animals and viruses, bacteria, all different kind of stuff. Before the Cambrian explosion, most organisms were simple, composed of individual cells, occasionally organized into colonies. As the rate of diversification subsequently accelerated, the variety of life began to resemble that of today. So imagine billions of years of just a single cell floating around, and then with like 10 or 20 million years in the span of such a small blink of an eye, basically, all this explosion. So no wonder they call it the Cambrian explosion. That such vast change was happening. So that is quite incredible to me, at least. And of course, to think of the earliest life, like how did the earliest life come about? If you can see something about earliest life. So earliest life, earliest known life forms, history of life, abiogenesis. I think that's what we're looking for. Abiogenesis. Abiogenesis, or informally the origin of life, is the natural process by which life has arisen from non-living matter, such as simple organic compounds. While the details of this process are still unknown, the prevailing scientific hypothesis is that the transition from non-living to living entities was not a single event, but an evolutionary process of increasing complexity that involved molecular self-replication, self-assembly, and single chemical reaction is said to be... Okay, so some kind of reaction, interesting, and the emergence of cell membranes. So this is not controversial, but the mechanisms of how it exactly happened are unknown. So interesting. I find it quite fascinating that we still have no idea how the first life actually came about. What do we have here? Thermodynamic self-organization. Oh, interesting. So starting with physics, of course, because it's non-living matter. And interesting, to go into kind of philosophical topic, like we ourselves as well. What was this beautiful picture? Okay, so that we ourselves as well, like when does life start? Because we are made of organs, and our organs are made of cells, and everyone still agrees that cells are life, and cells are also made of different kind of parts. And those parts by themselves are already maybe not so alive, but still alive, because they compose an organism. And then we get to proteins and lipids and stuff like that. Are those things alive? And then we get to molecules, and then we get to atoms. So it's so bizarre, at least to me, to think that we are just collections of atoms arranged in a way that we just happen to be alive. And even more so, the wonderful vast complexity of life, but also that we have this conscious experience. That just a bunch of atoms are able to do that. Of course, there's so much about the universe we do not understand. Another rabbit hole to go to would be consciousness, which we have no idea. Let's see here where were we? Earliest life forms. Age of Earth is about 4.54 billion years. Earliest undisputed evidence of life dates from at least 3.5 billion years ago. There is evidence that suggests life began as early as 4.5 billion years ago. So that is fascinating. So pretty much just right after the Earth was cool enough that there weren't oceans of lava and that actually liquid water could exist. As soon as that happened, life began. Of course, there are ideas like panspermia, so that the asteroid came and brought with it some kind of substances of life. Of course, we know that at the beginning of the Earth there were a lot of organic compounds, what we are made of, that stuff. But then we think about, well, this what is staggering is that there is evidence that it might be that life might have arisen like pretty much instantly after the Earth cooled down even a little bit. So what I wanted to say before is that, just the unlikelihood of molecules and particles coming together in such a way to create some kind of simple cell, it must be astronomical odds of such a thing happening. So maybe this is not correct, and maybe it did take at least a billion years, so that I could understand in the way that it forms. Maybe there are really special circumstances that let life evolve. There is so much we don't know about it, and it's interesting to think like the first thing. And of course the fact that we as human beings and everything else on the planet, we are all the great many greats grandchildren of this first single cell, or maybe a few single cells, whatever happened, we are all the direct descendants of them. So abiogenesis, astrobiology, extraterrestrial life. Oh, I was hoping to have a picture of the grey aliens. By the way, let's see, evolutionary history of all life. The grey aliens, the idea of grey aliens, the idea of grey aliens actually came from basically a book a long time ago, where the author was describing what human beings in the future year, like 1 million, would look like. And so basically all the media, everything took it as to be aliens, extraterrestrial life, but actually this picture of the grey aliens, let's get some better picture of grey aliens, gay aliens. Let's see, so this all obviously is so popular. First of all, this looks exactly like a human, so this is not alien. The odds of us seeing like aliens that would look like this with eyes and nose and a mouth, and still eyes, nose and a mouth. What's the weirdest one we could find? Still eyes, nose and mouth, hands and legs and feet and neck. All of these are human beings. I don't find any that are not humans here. Yes, they might look weird and odd and kind of not like us, but they have the human being body plan. So this, I think, is just the lack of creativity from human beings. What we can say is that basically all of this might be just hypothetical. If, probably we will change ourselves a lot with technological and biological enhancements. So unless we stop doing all technology, we will change ourselves radically through technology and biological engineering, and in wonderful, beautiful ways that we can go into in the future, and no one will force you to, change yourself against your will and all of that. But we have the power way before we turn into anything like that. But I guess if we had natural evolution going on, then that is something what hypothetically we could have turned into. But again, this was basically the image, the idea of what we might look like in the future. So it was never intended as an idea of the aliens, but it totally got hijacked. So this is a fun fact for the know. Didn't really start off thinking about aliens. What do we have? Oh, in case you didn't know, we have a pandemic going on. That's something. What a pretty bird. Okay, so evolutionary history of life. Do we have something interesting here? And God bless Wikipedia for having so much information on so much different kinds of things. I would be really excited in the future where we have better computational resources that we could actually run simulations of our planet, like 4 billion years ago, in the oceans, and see this super realistic simulation of what it would come up with and what life would be. Think how fun it would be to see artificially evolved life form inside a computer program. That would be fascinating. Okay, so what do we have? Okay, interesting. Possible causes. Despite the evidence that moderately complex animals existed before and possibly long before the start of the Cambrian, it seems that the pace of evolution was exceptionally fast in the early Cambrian. Possible explanation for this falls into three broad categories: environmental, developmental, and ecological changes. Any explanation must explain both the timing and magnitude of the explosion. Increase in oxygen levels. Okay, so this is this great oxidation event. Right, the great oxidation event, sometimes called great oxygenation event, oxygen catastrophe, oxygen crisis, oxygen holocaust, Jesus, oxygen revolution, was a time period where Earth's atmosphere and the shallow ocean experienced a rise in oxygen approximately 2.4 billion years ago during the Paleoproterozoic dinosaur era. So evidence suggests that it's biologically produced. Oxygen started to accumulate in the Earth's atmosphere and changed the Earth's atmosphere from a weakly reducing atmosphere. Okay, so weakly reducing atmosphere is where we don't have oxygen and there's no oxidation, to an oxidizing atmosphere. Okay, causing many existing species on Earth to die out. Okay, so this makes a bit more sense. So if many species died out, that makes sense. Bacteria, cyanobacteria. So we have these guys to thank for making all of our oxygen, pretty much. And this is, interesting coincidence, or coincidence, whatever you want to call it. Interesting that these things, killed a bunch of animals and started producing a lot of oxygen. Was this? Yeah, okay, so 2.4 billion years, and then it started to accumulate. So let's see, O2 built up in the Earth's atmosphere. Red and green lines represent the range and estimates, while time is measured in billions of years. Stage 1. Stage 1 is stage 1 here. Stage 1 is here. Practically no oxygen in the atmosphere. The oceans were also largely anoxic, with the possible exception of O2 in shallow oceans. Okay, so stage 2. Oxygen produced rising to values of 0.02 and 0.04 atmosphere, but absorbed in oceans and seabed rock. So stage 3. Oxygen starts to gas out of the oceans, but is absorbed by land surfaces. No significant change in oxygen level. And stage 4. Other oxygen reservoirs filled. Gas accumulates in atmosphere. So the other oxygen was absorbed by land surfaces, so no significant change, and absorbed in oceans and seabed rock, so they saturated everything with oxygen, and then when oxygen had no, I'm so tired of saying oxygen right now, and so when there was so much oxygen saturated everywhere that it had nowhere else to go, then it got finally in the atmosphere and started. Well, I wonder what happened here, but then it sort of took off, and that is interesting stuff. Okay, so this has been, hopefully you got some kind of interesting answers. I got some interesting answers. This is the first time that I'm just testing out this idea of Wikipedia trips, and we could go much deeper, and in the future I definitely want to go much deeper into topics. But for today, I hope it was something interesting. If you have any thoughts, please share them in the comments, and of course, thank you so much for watching, and take care.